Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code STARDUST to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
What's up, guys? This is Daniel Logan, Boba Fett from Attack of the Clones, The Clone Wars, Book of Boba, Skywalker Saga game, and hopefully many more things in the Star Wars galaxy. You are listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Yep, this is the way I've spoken.
Hello, Star Wars fans, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we're talking about this week's episode of The Bad Batch. But before we do that, Jay, want to remind everybody where we can be found around the internet.
Sure thing. Very easy to find us. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Podcast Stardust.
Okay, the dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield's down, we're now broadcasting to the galaxy. This will be our full spoiler discussion of episode 12 of season 3 of The Bad Batch, which is called Juggernaut. So, Jay, why don't you go ahead and give us the summary of this episode?
You got it, Dennis. After Omega is delivered to Tantiss, the Bad Batch begin working on their plan to rescue her, but they no longer have a ship. Phee Genoa arrives to solve that problem, but they still have to figure out where Tantiss is. Crosshair reluctantly suggests they free the disgraced Admiral Rampart from his Imperial labor camp. He might know how to find Tantiss since he sent Nala Se there. After hijacking an Imperial Juggernaut transport at the Imperial labor camp on the planet Erebus, they successfully retrieve Rampart. Meanwhile, on Tantiss, Dr. Hemlock reveals to Omega her part in the Imperial's plans.
Okay, so what's your overall thoughts on this one?
Oh, just once again, amazing storytelling, as always. I just love the fact that they're bringing back Rampart and they're giving him, some sort of a feature and also a job in all of this. And, we're still able to tie in, Crosshair and his reluctance to do all of these things, and then kind of moving forward with Omega and the whole M count thing, and getting to see Phee again, and all of those types of things. So, and some great action, with the Juggernaut. I mean, just so great. And I have to ask you, is this the same planet that we saw in The Mandalorian for that particular labor camp that they went to on this Erebus? Is that the same planet, or is it just that these different labor camps look alike?
They look alike. And the only reason why I know this is because I was trying to figure out the turbo tank, the Juggernaut thing here going on. And there's surprisingly more different models than I thought. And that planet was called... See, this is where it gets confusing because you've got Marok, who was the Inquisitor in Ahsoka, but the planet's name was something like that in The Mandalorian. And it was a different type of transport that they were using, but they're all along the same manufacturer that makes them. And so this turbo tank was a little bit different than the one that was in Revenge of the Sith that was on Kashyyyk, which was, but it's the same one, I believe, that was on Wobani that Jyn Erso was being transported in Rogue One. So, yeah, that was my digging into details homework for this episode.
Nice.
Yeah, I like this episode as well. And honestly, one of the reasons why I really enjoyed it is that besides a little bit of background information that we got Omega, and they are setting up what's going to happen in the last couple episodes because we got 3 left, it was just such a good action-packed episode. It
Yeah.
was Hunter, Wrecker, and Crosshair doing what they do best, and that is infiltrating an Imperial
Mhm.
outpost, stealing some Imperial equipment, fighting people off, and making the impossible possible. I mean,
Right.
the joke was when we met these guys is that there was two jokes actually. They were the Star Wars X-Men or the Star Wars A-Team, and this really was them finding a way. And I just really really dug this. It was a little bit shorter than most of our episodes. Typically, with all the credits and stuff like that, the episodes come in somewhere to like 25 to 30 minutes. But with all the foreign language credits, it's like 4 or 5 minutes of the episode. This one, before you got to the credits, was just about 20 minutes. And then there was like 4 or 5 minutes of credits after that. So it was a shorter, quicker episode, but I don't feel like it suffered for that.
No, it was very efficient, but it was also very good,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
And looking at the credits, we had some notable people returning to do some roles. Matthew Wood, who we know as the battle droids and General Grievous, voiced an Imperial driver and a stormtrooper. And Steve Bloom, Garza Aurelius himself,
Ah,
was back doing the voice of a stormtrooper and the prison warden.
nice.
It was there. So good to hear he was back doing some Star Wars.
No, I'm glad you looked that up because I had no idea. Very cool.
Yeah, I just waited till the credits came up as opposed to skipping forward to the next thing. Although I do have to say it's kind of funny. Recently, when I've been watching Star Wars and the Bad Batch, like it always recommends something for you. Any guess, or what did it recommend for you after you watched the Bad Batch?
Um,
Do you
I don't
remember?
pay attention. I just kinda
Okay.
hit the back button, and that's about it.
Yeah, it recommended Mickey Mouse's Clubhouse to me.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
And I was like, talk about a complete tonal shift. That's
Yeah.
not even the same thing.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about Omega first and get that out of the way because it's really only a couple minutes of the episode. The episode starts with her getting delivered to Tantiss and the CX clone removing the binders and Hemlock taking custody of her, delivering her to Emery Carr, who begins doing the testing on that. And Omega is informed that Nala Se is in a cell where she won't be helping her with any future escape attempts. And Omega tells Emery that she doesn't have to do this. Emery has a big sigh and says, "Unfortunately, I do." And, for what it's worth, Emery is happy Omega is safe. And then Omega asks if she really is. And then when we see her later, Emery's been doing some testing on her. And then Hemlock takes her to the vault and explains the whole thing about how an individual's M count cannot be directly replicated, that the levels degrade each time. And basically what they've done is they figured out that her blood is the only thing that's been capable of creating a replication without the degradation, but she's that part of the equation. She's not the M count part of the equation. So they moved this a little bit farther with the explanation, but it's starting to seem like Omega is in fact not a force sensitive, that the value we have in her is her ability to mix whatever makes her special with that of the force sensitive kids. That's how I
Right.
took it, but what's your interpretation?
Oh, yeah, that she's more of a catalyst or a
Mhm.
bridge kind of a thing than anything else. But, I got to thinking about though too is it's kind of interesting the fact that Dr. Hemlock gives Omega an explanation as to what is happening and why she's important and what this is going to entail when he was very explicit about keeping things not personal, with Dr. Carr, aka Emery, and the specimens.
Mhm.
Like, the least they know, the less they know, the better. But yet he was very okay with letting Omega know what was going on, and he could have very well just kept her in the dark. So, why do you think that he's gone that route with Omega, or is it just the simple fact that Omega kind of already knew a lot of things going on anyways, just because she'd been working with Nala Se, so you might as well sate her curiosity.
One, good question. Two, yes, I think you're right.
Gotcha.
Um, she has been around before she was a key component to the M count replication. She was part of everything that was going on Camino with Antipoca City,
Mhm.
and she's always been Omega. She was not acquired by Cad Bane. and then given a code number. And so really calling her anything other by her name is kind of futile at this point. And I think, yeah, sate her curiosity, because otherwise she's just going to be causing trouble anyways, but she'd probably be causing more trouble trying to figure out what's going on. So now she knows. Now, the danger in that is if these kids are being kept in the dark, let's prevent Omega from telling them what's going on. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Right.
Yeah. Are you satisfied with all this, with what's going on, Omega, and how this, I mean, not that we want to see Omega captured or anything, but that it is that, it's the combination of Omega's sample with that of the kid sample is what's creating a successful M count? Or were you hoping for or expecting Omega really to be force sensitive, or how do you feel about that?
Well, after several of our conversations that we've had leading up to this, I was kind of waffling back and forth between, does she need to be force sensitive? I mean, not that she really needs to be, but is that something that I wanted for her? And I've kind of landed on the fact that I'm glad that, we're getting to the point where Ventress was right. No, she's not force sensitive. She doesn't have these abilities. And I'm kind of glad for that, that she is Omega and that's just who she is, and that she doesn't have to have her character, pushed forward, if you will, by these force abilities. So I'm okay with it. But how about you?
Yeah, I think I'm okay with it, but there, for me, I wonder how the writers and directors feel about this right now. Like, do they feel like they've told us enough about this story? Because I'm still wondering, okay, how is Omega this way?
Mhm.
Because of all, now, plenty of clones have died before they ever had an opportunity to give a specimen and stuff like that. But Nala Se has been aware of this for a very, very long time and had been protecting Omega by destroying her samples, and so that this could not be revealed. Well, when did Nala Se learn about this? Was this by her design? And if so, why? And when did she start deciding to protect Omega? There's still these questions out here
Mhm.
about this. So I still have some curiosity that has not been satiated yet. So I want to know what that's all about.
No, and I think that we're going to get a lot more of that. And at this point, they're giving us just enough to
Mhm.
keep us on our toes, and
Yeah.
they're keeping us just enough to keep us interested. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've spent a lot of time on our Bad Batch reviews talking about her. So let's move on to the Bad Batch and the action of this scene. We're on Pabu. The Empire is kind of rounding things up and leaving. Hunter and Batcher make their way back to Shep's place where Crosshair and Wrecker are hanging out. And they all get together and, they're starting to make their plans. Comms are still jammed by the Venator class destroyer that's in orbit. And really, the only conversation about Crosshair letting Omega go, it takes place like real quick. It's like Wrecker says something along the lines of, I can't believe you let her go. And then Crosshair doesn't back down from this, doesn't apologize for it. He matter of fact says, like, she made this decision because otherwise the town was going to get destroyed.
hmm
And then they just kind of dropped the matter.
hmm
I don't know about you, but I was kind of glad about that.
Yeah, I was too. And I know that Wrecker sometimes leads with his heart, and he puts his heart on his sleeve, and he's still not really completely back to trusting Crosshair, I don't think yet. And so I just think that it was his emotions coming out, and he realizes that there was, some truth to what Crosshair was saying,
Mhm.
even though he didn't want to admit it.
Yeah, I mean, they could always backslide from this if they wanted to in upcoming episodes, and they've done this type of thing with characters in the Bad Batch in
hmm
earlier seasons. But I just didn't want a whole lot of time. Like, we can't trust Crosshair again. We've been down that road before, and I don't know that it really contributes anything to the show to visit that again. So I was glad that hey, they had it out. They did it briefly, and they're moving on with the storytelling because there's just not that much time left. This episode and three more, and we're done with the Bad
hmm
Batch. So
hmm
Phee shows up, And I, I absolutely love her introduction to Crosshair or in this one. He shows up and I can't remember what he says. It's so sarcastic, and she says, "Well, you must be Crosshair." and
Yeah.
and even she is like, Tech told me about you, and any friend of Brown Eyes is a friend of mine.
I love
So
that.
yeah, I love that little bit of endearment there as well. And they get right over the issue about not having a ship by Phee jumping right in saying, "Yep, I'll take you where you need to go." So that was pretty cool.
Oh, absolutely. And it's great that she's still, not just loyal to the Bad Batch, but she genuinely wants to help.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what's drawn her to Pabu, is what these people do, and the Bad Batch in their own way. A lot of times they're acting as mercenaries for their own interests, but they still do the right thing a lot of the
Hmm.
time,
Oh,
and
for sure.
they're opposing the Empire, which appeals to her as well.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about Crosshair not previously sharing any of this information about Rampart and Rampart possibly knowing where Tantiss is?
you know, there's part of me that thinks that there's a little bit more to Crosshair than maybe he's sharing. I mean, I think that he's very truthful in that he doesn't remember a whole lot or that he doesn't have that ability to be able to have that information. But, you could see right away that there's like that PTSD going on because his
Mhm.
hands start shaking again. But I do think that that was the best move, honestly. It's kind of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. And if that's their resource and that's what they can do and that's where they can go to get the information, then, so be it. And it does set up some fun like tension too.
Yeah, I actually like this move once I had a chance to think about it, or the story element, I should say, because he's developed this loyalty with Omega, and it's started to extend back to Hunter and Wrecker again. And it's one thing when they're running missions to try and figure out where Tantiss is,
Hmm.
because they're running missions and he can keep an eye on Omega. But they're not going back to he does not want to go back to Tantiss. So he doesn't have to volunteer that information. But she's no longer safe and she's gone back to Tantiss. So yeah, he'll do this now. But telling them about that would have meant they were doing something about that. And that's the last thing he wanted. So I
Yeah.
like that feature of him, which is this place made such a mark on him that's the last place he wants to go. And the first thing he wants to do is protect her. Second thing he
Right.
wants to do is protect his brothers and himself. But he's got to reconcile this in order to do what needs to be done. So I like that aspect of the story, and I don't know. I'm glad that they didn't keep pressing this issue. Just like why did you let Omega go? They dropped it, and then they drop it after this as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
So I like that he's kind of been brought back into their trust.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Okay. So they get to this world of, I believe it's called Erebus, and that's where this labor camp is. And as we talked about at the beginning of this discussion, they go into action. They figure out after Phee shows them a layout of the land, they realize that they're going to have to access a terminal to determine where Rampart is. And once they do that, they know he's going to be on a transport, so they decide to steal the transport. This was just shot after shot of great action. I
Hmm.
I love the infiltration of the Juggernaut. I love the scene on the bridge, on the side of the mountain when they're fighting back against the gunships and when they shake them off. Everything. This is high quality from start to finish.
Oh, yeah, and this is just pure you could just tell they just fell right back into place, and
Mhm.
there was no questions asked, and it was just boom, 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 and there was no time wasted, they knew exactly what they needed to do, and there was, some tension there too, because I know for myself personally, I was actually kinda like, they're on the side of
Mhm.
this cliff, and so I caught myself thinking to myself, "Gosh, anybody could perish at any point," and there was one point where they were getting ready to go across that bridge. I'm like, "Oh no, not another bridge. We lost tech on a
Mhm.
bridge. Let's just not do this,
Yeah.
please."
Yeah. Things over ravines are not good for the Bad Batch.
Right. Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, this episode contained the last scenes that we saw from the trailer before the
Okay.
season started.
Okay.
And so like we're really up in the air at this point about what might happen to our Bad Batchers. But, at the end of this episode where Wrecker has got to jump off the Juggernaut into Fee's ship, you were
Yeah.
talking about tension there. I was like, is he gonna make it? I
Mhm.
mean, I'm grabbing
Yep.
onto the couch while all
Yep.
this was happening. I was like, do not do this to us and Wrecker. Don't do it. I mean, there's a very good chance none of them survive the season finale, the series finale in a couple episodes. But I was
Mhm.
like, I don't want to be grieving like another character every week.
Oh,
So
I know. Well,
don't do
because all I
that.
could think of was, all right, they already teased this once with him
Mhm.
blowing up, with the Marauder, and so is this where it's gonna happen? And we know that Wrecker has this fear of heights, and so, like, all of this is going through my head at one time, and I'm like, "No, no, please don't take Wrecker. Not now."
Mhm. So what were your feelings on Rampart?
Oh, cool. Yeah, it
Mm.
was so cool to see him so rugged. It was like as soon as he came up on screen, I was like, "Oh, you're looking a little rough, aren't you, Rampart?" And he's, snarky as ever, but he's also, very realistic in the way that he was trying to get his own freedom and say, I went off this planet and, he was trying to bargain and kind of even use some of his old imperial training in some ways, but, of course, the Bad Batch got the better of him, but yeah, I thought it was really cool that they were utilizing his character again, but what do you think?
Okay. The way you described that just made me laugh because, I was thinking back to Rebels when we got Hot Callus after he basically defected
Oh,
from the
yeah.
Empire to the Rebellion. Now we got Rugged Rampart.
Rugged Rampart, I love it.
We'll have to start that hashtag on social media.
Yes,
Get out in front of
definitely.
this. I
Like it.
I I had put him out of my mind after the end of last season when, the Emperor basically showed up and blamed everything that happened on Camino on him and had him
Mhm.
arrested and sent off here. We didn't even know exactly where he went, but this was a clever solution because that was the big question at the end of the last episode is, Crosshair missed the shot to get the tracker on that clone ship. So how are they going to find her? And this is a very clever way that they worked in that didn't require the introduction of like new characters and other explanations that weren't readily apparent out there. This was, embedded in the show already. So I like that. And I also liked Rampart being an opportunist, which is you let the other prisoners go and you haven't killed me, which must mean you want something. And I'll give it to you, but you have to get me off this planet first.
Mhm.
And he knows he's got no future with the Empire, or at least I don't think that's his plan. That right now that he's going to betray them to try and get back in the Empire's favor, but that won't work because he was the fall guy for what happened earlier, and
Right,
everyone would know that. So,
right.
but yeah, it was cool seeing him back in that capacity.
So, yeah, and one thing occurred to me too is it surprising at all that he's actually even still alive? That he wasn't just completely disposed of given the gravity of everything that went down on Camino.
Yeah, they're just so inconsistent about that though in Star Wars.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would have expected. I mean, if Darth Vader was in charge of this, he just would have choked him to death.
Right,
So and been done
exactly.
with it. But that's not where we are with
Mhm.
this character. So yeah. So that kind of gets us through this episode. It's a very straightforward episode when it comes down to it. It's it keeps the two storylines separate with Omega showing up at it's the first thing in the episode and the last thing in the episode, and then it's all the Bad Batch in between. So it's kind of a sandwich that way.
Mhm.
Any final thoughts on this before we wrap it up?
Oh, just kinda cool the way that Wrecker and Crosshair were once again, kind of falling back into the old days and Plan 55, and they were just kinda running and they knew,
Oh,
of course,
do you remember
obviously
that?
exactly.
Yeah, I think so.
Exactly what to do. And then just the idea that, again, like you said, we got Omega kind of sandwiched at the very beginning and the very end, and then we've got these the children, the specimens that are basically looking up at Omega and seeing, okay, who's the new kid and what does this mean, kind of thing. And of course, I still think that Emery's going to come through and end up being an asset or an ally for all of them. I think that's definitely been set up as well. And even in this episode, I'm glad you're safe. She
Mhm.
didn't have to say that. I mean, and she did. And so that's just another little breadcrumb.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if she didn't come through
Mhm.
for at least Omega when this is all said and done.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
okay. Well, then, with that, just want to thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of this week's episode of The Bad Batch. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, and you want to catch our future discussions of The Bad Batch, we got 3 left. Make sure you hit the subscribe button or the follow button or whatever they call it on your podcatcher for Podcast Stardust. Also, like to remind you that you can find our entire catalog of shows over on retrozap.com, all previous 714 of them. And while you're there, you can check out some other great podcasts covering all kinds of aspects of geek culture. As always, we greatly appreciate your 5-star ratings and reviews on whatever podcatcher that you use that supports them, especially if it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And we love it when you share the show and your favorite episodes on social media with your friends. Speaking of which, Jay can remind everybody what those social media contacts are one more time.
You bet. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust. And we have tons of fun going on our Pinterest boards. And as Dennis mentioned, we have 2 YouTube channels. We have our YouTube regular channel and YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and leave some reviews for others to find us. And then if you're up for some real-time chatter, we do have a Discord room on the RetroZap Discord server. So if you are interested in talking some Bad Batch with us or anything else, you can hit up the link in our show notes and it'll take you right to where you need to go. And you can also check out all of the other Discord rooms over on the RetroZap Discord server as well. And we do have a TeePublic store where you can find 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of fun things. And so every one of those purchases does help out the show. So if you do end up getting something, make sure you snap a picture and tag us. And the link for that is also in our show notes. And speaking of other links in our show notes and ways to help the show and yourself as well, we are partnering with Saber Masters. And so you can pick up one of several amazing different lightsabers, and there's still a 2-for-1 deal going on the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0 on sabermasters.com. And when you get to checkout, make sure you put in the code Stardust and you will get $10 off. And it also helps to support the show. And once again, that link is in our show notes, or just simply go to sabermasters.com. So Dennis, I know you've got some fun stuff going on with Star Trek. So why don't you fill everybody in on that?
All right, so season 5 of Star Trek Discovery started last week. My wife Beth and I recorded our review of the 2-episode premiere, and that came out on this past Monday. So if you want to hear what I think about Star Trek Discovery, then head over to your podcatcher choice, look for the RetroZap podcast feed, and you can find Warp Trails there. And otherwise, head over to retrozap.com where all the episodes live as well. And if you want to find out what we thought about Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Picard, that stuff can also be found on retrozap.com. Jay, as this comes out, you're heading off to do some cosplaying, so fill everybody in.
Yes, I am. So when this airs, I will be at Fan Expo Cleveland for the weekend. And so you can check out all of my adventures and then some over on j.snips cosplay on Instagram. And I'm going to keep that cosplay train going. We've got another appearance next weekend in Worcester. And then I've got a couple more coming up in May for May the 4th and beyond. So having tons of fun. And it's a great community over there. So check out all the fun on j.snips cosplay.
Okay, upcoming on the show on Monday, we have Star Wars news. And on Wednesday, it is the next installment of our series looking at the Phantom Menace for its 25th anniversary. We got a great guest for that one. So thanks for listening to episode 715 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great weekend. And until next time, may the Force be with you.